Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. You got mail from me, Bella, and this week we're discussing girlhood and sisterhood and female friendships in your 20s because it's something that the last week with my sisters has been so incredibly eye-opening and healing. And I think it kind of rebuilding those, not rebuilding, but I guess reconnecting, because as much as we like to think we connect over FaceTime and text messages and things like that, it's not the same as spending time with that person. And for the last week, I was on holiday with my family and I just got to hang out with my sisters every single day. And it made me feel so grateful to be able to have that opportunity because I cannot honestly remember when it last happened in such a continuous streak. Like, I can't remember when I last did, like, without anyone else really being there. And it made me think a lot about girlhood and sisterhood and how that relationship has kind of evolved as I've got older. And so it's something that I wanted to speak about. But before we get on to that, it's time for a life update because, guys, it's been so long and I'm so sorry. Basically, the last podcast episode, it just wouldn't upload. It just refused to upload. It was having an absolute fit about it. The Wi-Fi wasn't strong enough in every single place that I went. But in hindsight, I think this was a blessing because yesterday when I was finally ready to post it, did a little scan through. I'd missed so many bloopers. There was one point where I'm literally just sat staring into space and I was fully ready to post this to everyone. And so maybe it was a blessing in disguise. But the holiday was such a lovely break from rainy Manchester. I've come back and I had the massive holiday blues. I can't lie, I was really depressed. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the happy thing that was the holiday itself because I got to merge different holidays together. And I know that was incredibly lucky because I managed to have this big break, which was such a lovely. I always thought, like, going into this summer, I kind of had it in my head that I wanted a summer of like more chill, a kind of summer that feels like when you've left school, that type of summer where it's not that serious because everything had felt so serious for so long. And I think that was really kind of my motivation for getting the job before. And I really feel like that this summer has been that for me, but we're going to talk more about that and why all of that is changing in next week's podcast episode. So I don't want to get ahead of myself. But the trip to Croatia this time, I feel like we've done Croatia now, but it was beautiful. But I feel like next year I've decided I want to go somewhere else because we've done it 2 years back to back. And we've done it a bit differently. So this year we went to Zadar and then Tisno for the festival and then we went to Murta afterwards. That's the way to do it. If you're ever going to one of the festivals and Dimensions at the Garden, that is the way. Because beforehand we did Dimensions, then a city break. It was really hard work. Was not in the best frame of mind for a city that was very busy and quite chaotic, and it was quite expensive as well. Whereas this, we just got to like cook for ourselves. We went to the beach, and I'm not gonna lie, like that's all we did. Every single day after the festival, all we did was cook and eat nice food, and it was perfect. Like there was nothing else I'd have wanted to spend those 5 days doing apart from just eating and sleeping and sunbathing and swimming and reading my book. And it was just a lovely way to feel like a really relaxed holiday. Because I do have a tendency to try and put as much as humanly possible as I can into 7 days. Because I'm like, oh my God, it's a holiday. We need to make the most of it. But actually, what I'm trying to focus on is how something's going to make me feel. And if it's going to make me feel like, the aim of that trip was to come back feeling relaxed and like I'd switched off and like I'd had a break. And the city break doesn't necessarily do that. And so it was really, really lovely to be able to have those 5 days afterwards to just literally do nothing. And the Airbnb was great. Like we managed to stumble across a really good one that was like very affordable. I think maybe it was like £300 for the entire stay, maybe a bit more. I remember it being like very affordable for what it was, and it was massive. It had like two balconies, like a balcony area and a terrace area. It had a whole like the most stocked up kitchen you've ever seen. It had everything you could ever need, and I think that also made it like feel very nice, like feel like relaxing because there was so much space. And I think before when we were staying for the festival, we were literally just sharing one room for 6 days, and one room, it was a small room, and I feel like by the end of it, me and Lou were just like, this is chaotic. And so it felt really nice to be able to come to this place and be able to switch off that bit more and be able to have that kind of like, there was even like a living room area. It was all open plan, which made it even better because then it didn't feel like you're being rude if you're off the other section, but you could just do your own thing, which sometimes is needed on holiday. Like back to back with the same people for 16 days is a lot. And so having your own space, I think, was something we were really fortunate to be able to have this time. But then after that, I apparently chose a really stupid way to do this. But I don't think I did. Because when I looked on everything, it said it took 12 hours. But my dad was like, no, it would only have taken 4 hours in the car. But I don't think that's the case. Because then once the festival ended, we were meant to fly back. But I decided to change I didn't change my flight. I just didn't take it. And I'm just going to have to accept the loss on that because my new flight was only £150. We're just not going to talk about it. It's like invisible. I just thought, when am I ever going to be able to spend a week with my family like this? Like, when is it ever going to happen? When am I going to have the time? When am I going to have like no real responsibilities? And when is everyone going to be in the same place? And I am in Croatia, so all I have to do is take a £20 ferry and I can get there. And then just a new flight, but we're not talking about the new flight because technically I paid for my flight ages ago, so it kind of didn't feel like it was a new flight. It just felt like it was the one flight. Anyway, we're not going to stress about it. It was really, really good to be able to then take the ferry, but the ferry, guys, it was long. It was so long. It literally went on for 6 hours. And it was all fun for like the first, because I decided, I was like, oh my God, I'll sit outside. This will be lovely. Way like fresh air. We'll be able to watch like the islands go past, and it was a beautiful ferry journey, and I made friends. This is a new thing that started happening. Every time I'm traveling on my own, I make friends, but never with people my own age. They're always like 40 years older than me. Like this time I made friends with Jill and what was his name? I think it was Jill and Kevin. Or Jill and Colin. Made friends with Jill and Colin. We chatted the entire journey. It was lovely. But I think this is the funny thing that also happened on the flight home. I made friends with the people on my aisle. We chatted for the entire plane journey, which was good and bad because I didn't get done anything I was meant to. But I did make 2 new friends who were both at least in their 50s, 60s. It's just, I feel like I attract conversation, but they're always so much. Maybe I'm an old soul. Maybe that's the answer. But anyway, I digress. I took the ferry and it was all really nice and pretty, and you saw all the sailing boats and the yachts and the islands going in and out of each port until it got really dark and quite choppy. Because if you imagine, right, Croatia is very long, okay, and I was down here, so the part where we were kind of close to the mainland and just going between the islands was really fun. But then there was this other part where you had to go across to Pula, and you're like properly going across the sea. Then that was less fun. That was very choppy and it was pitch black and you couldn't see anything, and I started to feel very travel sick because also I'd been editing for maybe 4 hours of just like on my phone, just sorting, like just editing to try and catch up with work, so I didn't have to do much when I was there. I felt nauseous, and then when I got there it was an hour's taxi journey and the roads were just like this. They're like up, down, around, up, down, around, all the way around like this, and I was like, I might actually be sick. And also the taxi drivers in Croatia, I've never, I would say Vietnam. I don't know if Vietnam was worse. No, I don't honestly think it was. The guy was literally on his Instagram DMs as he was driving me, and I could see him checking if he was going to overtake. And literally, there's a signpost there saying like no overtaking, and he's there. And I can see him like doing like a little swerve to see if he can get out. And I was really quite stressed about the entire experience. But once I got there, it's all lovely, and it was just nice to be able to have 7 more days of sunshine, because now I've got back to Manchester and it is miserable and gross and really not that fun. But I am still wearing a dress today because I feel like whilst I can still wear dresses, I should still wear dresses. It's not cold, it's just rainy and miserable and gross. And so that's fun. But anyway, on to the content part of this week's podcast episode. And this week we are discussing girlhood and sisterhood and everything that's connected to that. So as you all know, last week I spent the week with my sisters, and it got me thinking a lot about being a sister and how fundamental being a sister is to my identity and who I think I am. Because I think, not to be dramatic, but we're going to get straight into it. When I was with them and like hanging out with them, it made me kind of realise that there's always a part of me when I'm away from my family that kind of feels like a little bit lost. And I think that is sadly the reality of growing up, but it's also the fact that like there are these people out there who know you so well, and like you all fit into this group together, and if you're lucky enough to have a family structure where you get on with them well. I know this won't be the case for everyone, but like me and my sisters do get on really well, and me and my parents get on really well, and so it's like we have this family structure that's really positive and healthy. And I think when you're away from that, you kind of don't really clock it until you're back into it, that you realise that there's been like a part of you missing. I think specifically with your sisters, because I have 2 sisters. One's 2 years younger than me and one's 7 years younger than me. And I think we're now at the point where the age gap isn't so much of an age gap anymore. We're all adults. I think the 7-year age gap meant it's like I was always like quite a few chapters ahead. But now we're all almost in the same place. We're all adults. We're all that that jump isn't quite there anymore. And I think it's just made me realize how much closer we're getting. Because I think there's a point where when you're younger, you don't, well, I didn't really see like, I'd very like, my friends were my friends and my family were my family. And I think I remember when the girlhood trend was kind of coming along, that I did feel, because I have lots of friends, but I did kind of feel a little bit insecure about it all. I think because I saw this TikTok and it was like, all started when I watched the episode of Friends where Monica said like, or one of them said, I can't remember the name, like I got my girls, and I realized I didn't have that. And it's like, although I do have lots of friends, I've never had this big like girl group, like this solid girl group that's like there's 5 of us and we do everything together and like that's that. I've never really had that before. And I think when it all started to kind of come about, this whole like girlhood and what is girlhood, there was an element of me that felt a little bit insecure about the fact that I didn't have that. I felt like, had I done something wrong? Was there something wrong with me? Was there something broken in me as to like, why hadn't I managed to curate this? And it was only a small part of me that felt that, because I think the flip side of this trend is it's been such a beautiful way to create and connect different people. And I think connecting and allowing people to realize that we all have a very similar shared experience has been such a beautiful part. And I think it's made, I don't know, it's kind of put a voice to a feeling we've always all had, but it's made us realize that these collective experiences are something special and there is something special in sharing them. And I think that's what's been the thing for me in growing up and having sisters, is now we're all at a point where we're able to vocalize our shared experiences. We're able to vocalize these things that were similar. I'm not just like the older one that's off at university and they're still the ones at school. It's not like that anymore. There's not such a big difference. And being able to connect over that and connect over things that are similar was really, really just like something that made me think, oh, now my family are my friends too. I don't need to think of these as so black and white. I don't need to think like my family, and they can't count as friends. Like they can. And I think being able to develop this relationship with my sisters as we've got older is something that I think I took for granted. And I think I kind of, by taking it for granted, didn't make as much effort as I should. Like, obviously, like FaceTime and calling, and like you do everything that you do, but you forget that it's like quality time with someone, being able to actually hang out with them as a person is incredibly important as well. Because it's when you're actually just hanging out and being silly and like it's all fun, that's when you kind of unlock that little part of yourself that only they know. You know, you become different people around other people. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think that means you're like a chameleon of your character. I just think it's the reality that different people will unlock different parts of you. You know, you'll have friends that you're really silly with, and you'll have friends that you're a bit more serious with, and you'll have friends that they prefer having really deep chats, and you'll have friends who are just silly. And there's nothing wrong with that, because each of them bring out a different version of you. And I think that's the great thing about having our characteristics and having the different elements of who we are, is that we are able to reach and connect and evolve differently around different people. And I also think flip side, that's why it's so important that you choose the people you surround yourself with carefully, because they are going to impact the person you become. They're going to impact the traits that you portray. They are going to impact so much about yourself, so you have to pick wisely. But I think this linking back, and I think that's why you have to pick your friends so wisely. But I think there is definitely a pressure on how friendship should look like. And I think that does make sometimes friendship in your 20s tricky. There is this pressure that we're all going to have this massive group of friends, that we're all going to have these people that we do plans with every single weekend, and we have these group chats, and like that's this constant communication with these brilliant people. And I just actually don't think that's the case for so many people. I am not really in any group chats, I don't think. Like, I think my family group chat is the only group chat that I actually properly chat in daily. You know, that's it. And I think it's, you know, sometimes it feels like scary to admit that, and a little bit like, oh, what if everyone just thinks I'm boring? But it's not that you don't have people to chat to, it's just that friendship looks different. And I think this idea that we all have these big, massive friendship groups isn't actually true. You know, it's actually quite hard to make friends in your 20s. I think the reason it's quite hard is because throughout all of our life, throughout school and university, if you went, you're put in these environments where you are forced to interact with people your own age. It's not weird if you go up and chat to someone just randomly because they're in your class. You know, you start to make these little friendships and these connections, and all of a sudden, whilst you're doing that, you start to become friends with them, and then they connect you to their friends, and you find someone at lunch and you actually just start chatting with them at lunchtime. And, you know, it's these forced environments that make you interact with other people, that make it so much easier to make friends. Then all of a sudden you leave and you go back to your work and home. And those environments where it's so much easier to meet people become less and less and less. And so I know it's easy to think that friendships have to look a certain way, but I think we have to give ourselves some grace. I think it's easy to forget that like our environments have changed, our situations have changed. So how friendship looks in our 20s is going to be different to how friendship looks in our teenage years. But I think the beautiful thing about how friendship changes in your 20s is you become more aware of yourself as a person and of other people as people. And I think that's where trends like the whole girlhood trend and being able to like connect with different people has become really special, because we're able to comprehend how ourselves and our own experience is very similar to other people's experiences, and the struggles that we've had are also struggles that they've had, and it's something where we can be really quite open with how we're feeling. And I think that's something that's really lovely, because I think there is something that's about the 20s is it can feel quite an isolating decade. You know, you're finally on your own for the first time and it can be a lot. And I think this has been the thing that I've kind of struggled with, is just like finding your way. But hearing other people's experiences can be so helpful in making you realize that, you know, you've got time to find your way. I love it when I stumble upon one of those reels and it's like, I want to hear from the over 35-year-olds, what's your biggest, like, what's your thing you wish you'd learn? Or what's the thing you'd wish you'd shared? Or what's the thing you wish you'd do differently? And it's like all of this community building and being able to share stories has kind of been lost, because if you think about our ancestors, the sharing stories and that constant communication and the narratives were so much easier because the populations were so much smaller. But now, because we are becoming more and more kind of individuals, like we're just using social media and technology, and you know, people are less are likely to just hang out and talk to random other people, because of the online world, it's become so much easier to be isolated, because you don't have to reach out as much. You can connect with people literally by scrolling. You can see videos from thousands and thousands of people, and I think in a way this has helped because you're able to regain that storytelling because you can say your narrative. But I also think there's an intimacy in when someone just shares a story with just you. Like, you know, when you go out for like a drink with just like one friend and all of a sudden you end up talking about like the deepest things that you've never really spoken about before, because there's a space for those types of conversations. I think that's the really lovely thing about the girlhood trend, is because it's given space for those types of conversations again on a bigger scale, and it's made us realize that these things that we're feeling, it kind of validated those feelings. And in the way that that big sister that I hope to be for like younger people, I have found that in older people too. And even though they are strangers on the internet and, you know, I don't know too much of the background or anything like that, just being able to read and listen to those stories was really helpful. And I think one big thing that I noticed whilst I was with my sisters for the last week is how healing having sisters is. Because all of a sudden, you're able to, well, not really, all of a sudden is a silly turn of phrase, but like you are able to look at people and see them for the age that you were when you, like, we all have things we've done that we regret. We all have mistakes we've made. Literally no one is perfect. And, you know, there's certain things and decisions that I look at in my life that I think, you know what, I wish I could have done that differently. I wish I could have changed my mind. I wish if I'd have done that, then this would have worked out like this. And it's, you know, we all have regrets. As much as we don't want to have them, we do have them. But being able to see my sisters for the age that they're at now has been healing, because it's made me realize how young I was at that age. It's kind of stopped me holding myself to so much, like, such high, not high standards, but like expectation. It's taken away the expectation that I feel I should have done by a certain age. Like, I think a lot about things I would do differently. And I think before, I'd seen my sisters at 16 and 18 and 20 and 21, 22, 23, 24. It for some reason, I just think of myself in those ages as like almost myself now. And I'm like, God, why did I do that? But right now, I'm able to see that was a bad decision because I'm older and I've grown and things have changed. And being able to see someone at that age has just been a really healing experience. And I think it's allowed me to, like, not in like so much of a dramatic way, forgive myself, but kind of let go of this regret, to see it for what it was, to see it for a decision that a young person made when they didn't know really what they were doing. You know, it's put a lot less pressure on myself. And I think it's also allowed me to be a bit more forgiving to myself currently, because I know I'm going to look at this in 5 year times and be like, she was just figuring it out. Like, there was so much going on, that there was so much change, there was so much, she there was so much change that she was just figuring it out. And I think it's allowing yourself the grace to figure it out. And if you don't have sisters or siblings or people that are younger than you, I think sometimes this must be hard to be able to see that age for what it was. And so I want this to remind you that, we all have regrets for things we did when we were younger. You wouldn't be human if you didn't. But try to let go of them, because the regret is because of an expectation you held in yourself. But the fact that you have that expectation now shows you that you've grown. And that's all you could do. That's all you can do from a bad decision, is grow from it. And the fact that now you regret that decision shows that you have grown from it. And so you have to let it go, and with the confidence and knowledge that you will make new decisions that will be better suited for the person you are now. And that is not a bad thing. And so I know it's easy to hold yourself to a really high standard. And I know it's easy also to feel quite insecure when these big trends come about, and it makes you feel like there's a lot of pressure on how friendships should be, and you question whether or not your friendships look like that because they don't fit that box. But what I think the girlhood trend should really make us think about is how similar all of these experiences that we have are, and how collected our experiences are, and how there is strength in that collective experience. I don't want you to feel ever isolated on your own. I don't want you to think that what you're going through, like what I've realised the more older I get, is that I have never had a completely unique experience. Anything that has happened relationship-wise or friendship-wise or job-wise, like there is no chance that that could be a completely unique experience. Which means that the fact that this collective experience is something we can share in also means we can find strength in it. It means there's people who are sharing the story of how they got through it, which means you can learn without having to go through it yourself. And I think that is something that's really beautiful that's come from the trend. And I think being able to connect with people older, be able to create more of this like group of people who are able to share their own lived experiences makes the world feel less alone. And I think that's something that's really beautiful. But I also hope that you learn to live without so much expectation on yourself. Because I think the fact that we live with regret, the fact that we have regret about certain experiences shows that we're growing and changing as a person. And that is something that is, that's something that should be celebrated. So I know it's easy when you feel that regret to really beat yourself up about it, but I just want you to try and see it for what it is. You made a decision when you were young, and now you wouldn't make that decision now. And that is a good thing, because that shows that you have grown. And I think that's what we should focus about. But anyway, on to the question part of this week's podcast. Okay, somehow I've managed to lose about 10 minutes just watching my own vlogs back. I don't know why I thought this was a good time to review content when I've literally got to leave for the hairdressers in 5 minutes, people. This is what we're working with to go with. It's actually not bad, to be honest, but I just wanted something like, I don't know, after a month of being in the sun, it's dry. I can feel that it's dry. My fringe is too long. I just don't really love the shape of it. And so I'm hoping they're going to work their magic. But this week's first question is, how can I motivate myself to study whilst working and wanting to have a social life? I'm about to also struggle with this, not in the studying sense, but I'm about to have to do a lot more balancing and juggling than I've had to do before. And I think a key part of it is and it sounds really boring, but I think you do have to plan. I have a thing on my to-do list tomorrow, which is work out what I need to do each day. Work out what I can do after the hours of 9 and 5. How am I going to be able to fit everything in? And I think once you know your routine, you know your structure of when you have to study, and you're going to have to be strict with yourself. There's no fun, easy way to be not studying and going, you're going to have to be strict with yourself, and that's not what you want to hear. But if you say to yourself, okay, between the hours of, 5 and 7, that's when I do my studying. After that, I can do whatever I want to do. Then I think you'll feel so much better, because then you're staying on top of things. And I also think it's better to do the studying first, get it out of the way, and then go and be with your friends, then go and do your socializing, then go and have a life. I think that's the way that I always found out to be best. And I also think I maybe studied a bit too hard at university. I think it depends what course you're on, it depends what worked for you, but I know a lot of people who treated it like a 9 to 5 job and found that a lot easier. I think it's really dependent on how many hours you have though, so that can be a bit tricky, how many in person. I had loads of lectures, so that wasn't really possible. But I think work out what way you're going to study, make sure it's conscious studying and active learning so it's actually beneficial, and then create a timetable. Okay, and then do it like that, because then you know when you're doing it, and then you know when people are making plans, oh, you can't do that then because you're doing something else, because you've got your work on. And I mean, you don't have to be so rigid with it. I guess you can be flexible, but I found, as boring as it is, being rigid for me was the best way, because being strict with my plan and saying when I'm going to do something means I actually do it. Otherwise, I go and meet friends and they suggest a new plan, new plan, new plan. Before you know it, you've reached the end of the day and I've done nothing I was meant to do. And so I do have to be a bit strict with myself. Final question of this week's podcast is, what would you say the biggest lesson you've learned this summer is? I think the biggest lesson I've learned this summer, I think this summer has really taught me to enjoy the journey, to focus on the fact that in every single thing we do, there is something positive, there is something good, there is something to be celebrated, there is something that we should look at and think, this is great. Because I think sometimes it's easy to forget that, it's easy to only focus on the negatives. But this summer, I've really had to channel my inner positivity, and it's been something that I'm really proud of myself for doing, because I've learned how to appreciate even like the tiniest of things. And I think when you're in work and jobs that are different, I think it makes you appreciate what you have. When everything isn't really going to plan, it makes you see what is going to plan and makes you feel grateful for that. And I think this summer's also taught me that, I think this summer's also been a big lesson in that things will fall into place. You know, if you work hard, if you try your best, if you constantly push the thing you want, eventually it will come. It just might not come on the timeline you're expecting. And I think that's been, actually, you know what? That's been the biggest lesson this summer has taught me. The great things and things you want to have in your life, as long as you're doing everything you can to make sure that they happen, as long as you're taking action, they're going to happen, but it's probably not going to happen on the timeline you expect them to happen. And that can be the hardest pill to swallow, because as soon as you're ready for it, as soon as you want it, you're thinking, why is it not here yet? Does that mean everything's just gone wrong? Does that mean everything has failed? But no. Just means it's going to happen when the universe thinks it's ready for it to happen, which isn't going to be the same time as when you think. But anyway, I have to run because I literally have 30 minutes to power walk to the hairdressers and I can see my SD card's about to run out. But I love you. Thank you for watching this week's episode. I'm so sorry we had that small unplanned hiatus, but we're back. Okay, we're back with a fury. And now every Sunday at 9 a.m. you'll be getting your podcast episodes. But I love you. I hope you have a great week and I can't wait to speak to you soon. Bye. Mwah.